Welcome back. Today we're going to get started with SingleStore stored procedures using Java. You can grab a link to this code in the description below. To get started with SingleStore is a really simple three-step process. First, we sign up for a SingleStore license. This is free. Next, we spin up a cluster either in the cloud, in virtual machines, or in containers. In this case, we'll use SingleStore Managed Service. Finally, we modify our application to connect to that database and run it. Let's get started. First step, we need to sign up with this form. Once we fill in the information and click the link in the email, we'll get here to the customer portal. Now here in the customer portal, I've chosen to create a new cluster and my cluster is ready to go. Next, I need to start loading data. Let's come in here and we'll go into the SQL editor and start loading our data into place. I'm going to come back here into the application and open up init.sql. And let's go grab all of our content. First step, let's create a database. I'll hit run. Now I see that I can push Control and Enter to do this, so let's do that. Control Enter. And now we're using that database. Let's create a new table. Now we'll create the store procedures. We first flip into a delimiter mode so that we can put semicolons inside of our store procedures. Let's create a create statement, a read by ID, a read all, an update, and finally a delete. Let's go grab all of those and Control Enter gets those store procedures into place. Now let's execute one and see how it works. We inserted row 1. That's perfect. Step 1 is done. Step 2 is done. Now we need to go grab the connection details, set them into our application, and run it. Here in the customer portal, we'll click on our cluster, and we'll click on the Connect tab to be able to get the details. Here is that host name. I'll copy that, come in here to my app.java, and set that as my host name. Now in this case, the username is not root, it's password. I can see that here in the portal. I'll scroll down and I have the username as admin. Now I'm going to set the password and the database. Now that we've got our content into place, let's build our app. Now that our app has built successfully, let's run it. Now this app does all of the standard create, read, update, and delete mechanisms. Let's dig into the application and see how it works. First thing, we're going to form our JDBC connection. We're using the standard JDBC MariaDB driver in this case. Once we've got our connection, then let's go create a row. Once we've created it, we'll read that row back out based on our primary key and print that row to the console. Then we'll update the row, where before the text was inserted row, we'll now change that to be updated row. Then we'll go read all the rows, outputting each row. Finally, we'll go delete a row. Let's look at each of those functions. First, create. We're calling into a store procedure, and so we're passing in question mark, meaning a parameter here. We avoid SQL injection that way. So we're going to call that store procedure and ultimately get back the result set, which is that primary key. Read 1, we'll pass in the ID and we'll get back the row and convert that into a message object, returning that to the caller. Read all, in this case we'll call the messages read all store procedure and harvest all of the rows that we get back from this result set. Update, we're going to pass in those two values, the primary key and the new content. That we'll call messages update, updating our row. And finally delete. We'll call messages delete, passing in our ID, and delete that message. So, create, read 1, update, read all, and delete. It's easy to extend this app to handle any kind of scenarios or any kind of tables. Let's run it again and see how it works. So we inserted row ID 3, then we read ID 3. We can see that that row is inserted right now. We'll update that row, and as we read all rows, we'll see that we have that original one we created in the portal, and also this new updated row. Finally, we'll delete the row, and we're done. Getting started with SingleStore stored procedures with Java is really easy. You can grab a link to this code in the link in the description below. And happy coding! Thanks for watching.